everyone, and welcome back to the 1960s Project. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Last time we were here, Russell and I covered Carthage in Flames, and we're going to be continuing on in the year 1960. Russell, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good. And we've got two films to cover this time around. And I think, just gauging by the temperature of both of us, I think liked, but we didn't love. With Flesh and the Fiends, I was kind of like, I don't know how he's going to take to this one, but I think you may have liked it a little more than me. I liked it, but your review seems to be, if your letterbox is anything, seems to be pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it was pleasantly surprising. I think both of them actually were. So we'll get into it and we'll talk about that.
Before we get any further, like, subscribe, do the thing. Subscribe on Spotify. The iTunes is in progress. I'm working on it. It's surprisingly tricky, but I digress. But audio, video, whatever your fancy, leave a like, subscribe, do the thing. Let us get into it. Starting off with The Flesh and the Fiends.
Upon shock, terror upon terror, shatter the screen in The Fiendish Ghoul.
The Flesh and the Fiends was directed by John Gilling and it starred Peter Cushing and Donald Pleasance, among others. And it tells the story of a doctor named Robert Knox, played by Cushing, who is trying to conduct research on anatomy and other things for his classes. However, due to the style and fashion of the time, human bodies are not really that easy to come by, and so he enlists two grave robbers, or what he calls resurrection men, named Burke and Hare. And well, things get things don't go so well from there. So I'm a big fan of Peter Cushing. I am like he's one of those actors where even if the material is not super great, I will stop and watch it just for him. And he was in some crap, like mostly because of grief, and that's a long story, but he was in a movie called Shockwaves where it was about underwater Nazi zombies. Yes, really. So he was in some terrible movies, but he has such a dignity that even in material that would be seen as like depraved, he at least elevates it. So this was going to be interesting to hear your thoughts, Russell. So go ahead. What did you think?
Yeah, this is honestly probably I would say my first introduction to Peter Cushing. I would say because I know a lot of the older films that he was in. I really haven't seen, not that I'm aware of. Um, I liked it fine. It's nice to see him way before, almost 20 years before, his kind of resurgence, I should say, into pop culture, I would say. Um, but I liked it. I liked the sinister character of it. I liked how it felt like a really like a dark British horror thriller. And I kind of liked it. Cushing really wasn't in it too much, but when he's in it, you kind of pay attention to the screen. Um, but I like the whole, he has to have bodies. These guys find ways, okay, well, we can kill people and get paid for it. Let's just do that. I think it's sinister, but it's smart. This is obviously before any, technology would like get people in trouble. Uh, and way before obviously surveillance cameras and back streets and all that fun stuff. But I think it was like it's a really like a dark tale, and I really kind of dug it. You know what I mean? It was one of those ones you wanted to see. Kind of had an idea what was going to happen, but you wanted to find out. And it definitely just it held your attention.
The movie takes place in 1828. So to your point about the technology, if cell
Yeah.
phones were around, this would not be a thing. Like there is no way they'd be able to get away with this.
No, and obviously, like I kind of like not to compare it to like a blockbuster film, but you kind of get that England from Hell type vibes. You know what I mean? Um, serial killer. It's intriguing. It has an actual plot to it. It's not that far fetched. It makes sense. It's plausible, and I think that's why you can believe it a little bit. And I think that's what makes it stand on its own.
Peter Cushing is someone who a lot of people know. He was Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars, and for a generation,
Yeah,
that's like the literally the only thing he's known for. But like I said,
yeah.
he was in a ton of movies, specifically for an English studio called Hammer, which is still around, but they were dormant for a lot of years. Again, very long story. And Donald Pleasance had kind of a second wind of his career in Italy. He was in a lot of the Giallo films for Dario Argento and a bunch of others. So they were acting, they were around, but Star Wars and the original Halloween are so iconic that
Oh
for
yeah.
everyone it's like, oh, these people are were in like these things and these things alone. And it's like it's kind of like getting into a band like say I'll say Led Zeppelin for an example and like knowing them for just something like Ramble On. It's like, yeah, Ramble On's an awesome song, but Led Zeppelin's catalog is deep and it gets better the more you dig.
Yeah. And this is always, and it always kind of reminds me of films like you'll watch from like the 90s or whatever, and you see people that are popular like in the late 2000s, like, oh my God, they got their start in these 90s films. You know what I mean? It's nice to go back and see that catalog. Yeah, obviously with Peter Cushing, obviously Grand Moff Tarkin. But I really didn't get anything where a standalone Peter Cushing type film. And I think this was my introduction to that. And then obviously with Donald Pleasance, really nothing outside of the Halloween franchise that I could even think of.
Thing about this movie being Flesh and the Fiends is that this is more like Russell was talking about. This is more of a Donald Pleasance heavy movie, and I do appreciate that. Peter Cushing's in it a little bit, but I wish he would have been in it more. And I kind of get why he's not in it super much. His role is basically this doctor, but he has to stoop to even deeper and darker lows in order to get the results that he wants. It's kind of similar to what he was doing around the same time with Hammer and their Frankenstein series. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. But King had just a talent for playing these mad scientists, but he wasn't like bouncing off the walls. He had like a dignity to it. And especially with a story like this, where it's about stealing bodies and then eventually killing people. In a lesser movie, it would have been like treated as like B movie stuff, but it doesn't really do that.
No, and that's what I appreciate about it. It was one of those ones. Obviously, Carthage and Flames coming off of that one, we needed a reprieval from that, and I think this week really delivered with the films that we had this week. Definitely was pleasantly surprised. But like you said, this is a Donald Pleasance heavy movie. But it's great to see him acting outside of the norm. Sam Loomis chasing Michael Myers. You know what I mean? Like I think this really showcases what an actor he really was.
I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, it's one of those movies where you look at it and you go, oh yeah, Cushing and Pleasance were in more stuff, but it's also like saying like, yeah, they were good in this, but they're better in other things. This movie, it's really going to be an acquired taste for some. It's very British. It's very much leaning towards that aesthetic, for lack of a better example. For being only 94 or 95 minutes long, depending on which version you're watching, it can be a bit slow. It was a little slow for me
Yeah,
personally, but it's really it's that style of like gentle like Kensington gore, as it is said in certain circles, is really going to be an acquired taste. So I say it to the viewer slash listener, know your mileage when it comes to something like this.
yeah, and I think this is something that obviously I, not having really any expertise in or any background in, I think it took a while to kind of get used to the feel of this film. I bought it on Amazon Prime. I think it was $4.99 to buy. It really doesn't. I mean, the resolution is not the greatest. Obviously, 1960s movie, 65 years old, but it was glad enough to just own it. You know what I mean? And yeah, like how you said, it's a slow burn, but if you know what you're getting into, try to dabble with it for a little bit. And I think in the 20-25 minute mark, I think you can slowly kind of get acclimated to the rest of the film, you know?
Yeah, and I appreciated that it didn't go the route that I was expecting it to go, where it like I appreciated that Cushing's character kind of learned a lesson. Like I appreciated the spirit of that. I won't spoil it in case anyone is interested. But let's just say that it starts out like with Cushing being diabolical, but by the end comes around and like the edges are smoothed out, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. I understand what you're saying. They could have went that different route, but I like how they pulled back on that, um, and put like more of a humanistic, like I learned a lesson type thing. I did kind of appreciate that.
So at the end of the day, I'm going to give this on my scale. I'm going to give this a good rating. Like I said, this is very much a know your mileage kind of movie in that it's very British, it's black and white, it can be slow at points. For some, that's going to be like, not for me. But I give this one a chance. If for nothing else, Donald Pleasance, he crushes like always, and Peter Cushing when he is in there. It's one more note before we do move on. This was actually also based on a true story, loosely, but it's based on a true story of the Burke and Hare case because Burke and Hare are the name of the resurrection men in the movie. So this is loosely based on a true story. How true it is, I don't know. Like we just were reviewing this for the first time, so could be just complete nonsense and we just wouldn't know.
Yeah, and then to throw my rating on, like I said, I put on Letterbox, about 3.5. I would put this like 3.5. Those stars are always really hard to navigate around because you kind of think about things for a little bit, and you're like, well, and that's where I'm starting to do things, and you're like, well, you have this movie rated at this, and you know what I mean. At the time when you're watching it, I mean, it's a serviceable film. It's definitely better than Carthage and Flames. So to me, and like we said, Donald Pleasance absolutely worth the price of admission. I think him alone really carries the film, and I think if you give it a chance, you'd be pleasantly surprised, like I was.
Well, to close things out for this time around for 60s Project, let's close things out by taking a hard left in terms of tone and actors, and let's take a look at the world of one Jerry Lewis, not Jerry Lee Lewis, Jerry Lewis. It's Visit to a Small Planet. The synopsis on IMDb is quite simply the weirdest alien of the galaxy pays visit to Earth. That's it. That's literally
Really,
the synopsis.
really, and it's like a how-to for dummies. That's really, I mean, the basic nook and crannies of the film. That's really what it is, you know.
So this is the thing about like when I was thinking about doing the 60s project, I was like, we're going to be covering some weird ones because, you have your Stone Cold classics that we're going to get to, but then
Oh yeah.
you have these little ones where you have no knowledge of other than probably who the star is and potentially who directs it. I have seen the Nutty Professor with Jerry Lewis in it, but it's been a very long time. I wasn't crazy about this one, Russell. I thought it was okay. It made me laugh at parts, but I think this comedy feels, for me at least, very much like of its time and like certain humor how it's
Oh,
delivered this time.
100%. I rated it again around the same as the last film, just because of the fact that this was actually my kind of introduction to Jerry Lewis. Like, obviously, I know the Nutty Professor. I never saw the original, so I guess shame on me. But this was my first like kind of uh, you know Jerry Lewis film, and I just thought it was like pretty interesting. Like obviously the slapstick comedy was huge back in the 50s, 60s. Obviously you think even right around the time of the Three Stooges, and even later on down the road with like the Benny Hill show. Slapstick comedy's been around for quite some time. We could even say Chevy Chase, more modern day. You have your, I would even throw Pee Wee Herman in there too. I even kind of throw a little slapstick esque comedy with him. But Chevy Chase definitely the one that I think of like in modern times. But yeah, I like this movie fine. I kind of understood the mission when I started watching it, and I just kind of fell into it. I kind of enjoyed it more than I thought I was.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, like first of all, I love the Pee Wee Herman line where he goes, "That's so funny, I forgot to laugh." Like I love that line
Yeah,
so much. Like I
yeah,
don't get to use it in public enough, and I should find more excuses to. But I the thing about this one is that if you're really into Jerry Lewis, then you're gonna love this one. I've only
yeah.
seen the original Nutty Professor maybe once, like 10 years ago. I
Okay,
remember liking it fine, but like you gotta be really into him to like this one, and I thought this one
100%.
was just okay. And it really, a lot of the humor in this movie, like you said, was slapstick. It really just comes down to the stressed out father being like, "What is the meaning of all of this?" And like that's not
Yeah,
an actual line of dialogue in the movie, but that's
yeah,
more or less what all is going on here.
yeah, and pretty much like uh Jerry Lewis's character can kind of like alter what other people say or kind of like put words into their mouth because he doesn't want anybody to know that he's from another planet, like an alien from another planet. So like that was like an ongoing thing throughout the whole entire film. I don't know. I really just kind of got into it, man. Honestly, as you start watching it, it's silly. And it can be kind of stupid at times, but it's just like I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of gelled with it. It was just watching it. It was a fun watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, seems like you liked it more than me. I like for me, I'm slowly as I'm like maturing as a film fan, like comedies are
Yeah.
the one genre that I'm like I either love it or I'm just like I couldn't be asked for it. Like I don't hate it, but I just like I'm like hot and cold on it. Like
Oh,
I guess I can make a whole video talking about like my
yeah.
stance on it, but that's where I'm sitting right now.
Well, no, 100%. And, even me at, at 41, like my wife loves The Princess Bride. Me, on the other hand, I'm just like, I honestly just, I can't get into it, like with the humor and stuff like that too. So see, like stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Even a Monty Python, like I remember Chance and I reviewed that, and I'm just kind of like, again, it's kind of like an acquired taste. I had never seen any of that kind of stuff before, and then I was like, yeah, funny, but it's not like what everybody blows it out to be. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of understand what you're saying, and I think this is a good thing for us though, because as we kind of get our feet wet more and more as we go through the decades and stuff like that in the years, I think us seeing it a little bit more, I think we have a different appreciation for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, when it comes to Monty Python, it's really talk about an acquired taste. Like they have a
Yeah,
lot of jokes, and I love Monty Python personally, but I can
yeah,
also recognize that a lot of their humor is very British, and if
yeah,
it is like some things where it's like if you're there and you know it, then it's going to work. And in some
yeah.
cases, if it doesn't, then it's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I think that's just something that maybe I just need to revisit, like revisit that, or watch some of the other films. But I never try to shut things out. I always give things a chance. Um, but and I like this whole project because we're tackling things that you and I would never watch. We would never watch these films. These would never come up. But I like it for the sake of film knowledge and just to get acquired to do, like just get our feet wet in different things that we normally wouldn't watch, like kind of out of our comfort zone, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I agree. But for me personally, for Visit to a Small Planet, for me, this one is pretty forgettable. It made me chuckle a couple of times, but again, this is a personal thing. With me in comedies, it's difficult. Like I said, I could do a whole video talking about like my stance on it, but I have it gets to a certain point where I'm just like, do I have a funny bone anymore? And then I like look up something like Gabriel Iglesias or something like that. And I'm like, okay, yep, I just like certain things, I guess.
No, yeah, no, I get it. I would rate this around the same as Flesh and the Fiends. I would slightly say that if we had to like rank the two films, man, to me it's a lot closer in ranking than I think you. I think you obviously Flesh and the Fiends way, obviously ahead of uh, a Small Planet, but I thought Visit to a Small Planet was fine. So I would just based on uh what like how you said like with Flesh and the Fiends I think it was a little bit slower to get into, while Visit to a Small Planet to me it was just an easier watch. I felt like that the 85-minute runtime went really quick. So I will give the edge to Visit to a Small Planet, and then Flesh and the Fiends sat right behind it.
In the words of Willy Wonka, scratch that, reverse that for me. Like narrow edge to Flesh and the Fiends for me.
Yeah.
But that's fine. Like both movies are good for what they are. They're not like time wasters. I think there's effort put forth, and it's really just going to be up to the viewer, like which one you prefer. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, and I mean, and definitely both better than Carthage and Flames. So to me, I'm good with that.
But I pass it off to all of you. What did you think of either of these movies if you've seen them? Let us know in the comments. We would love to read what you have to say and talk about more about what we got coming up on 60s in a couple of weeks. But Russell, thank you so much for doing this as always. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, Facebook, Notorious by Chance. That is where we put the polls up. Our next episode, we will be doing. There's going to be one on YouTube and one podcast form. I believe the podcast one should be top 20 performances of the calendar year 2024. And then we will also do top 10 films of the 2024 season on YouTube. Also, we did a poll for the late David Lynch, and not a surprise. I'm really excited to revisit Mulholland Drive, so I'm really excited about that. So we'll have that coming down the road. And Den of Thieves should be coming out hopefully by the time this airs. Hopefully Den of Thieves is, I mean, it's already been recorded. Hopefully it'll be out to wherever you get your podcast. And then, like I said, Notorious by Chance on YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, go give them a subscribe. They do great work over at Notorious by Chance. But as far as the 60s project go, in a couple weeks' time, we'll be dipping our toes into the waters of Ingmar Bergman by taking a look at Smiles of a Summer Night, which technically came out in 1955 but didn't get an American release until 1960 because its international films just worked differently back then. And then following that up, we'll be covering the film Testament of Orpheus. That'll be in a couple weeks' time. But thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, do that whole thing. If you're listening on audio, give us a 5 stars. We would appreciate it very much. For Russell, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you.